Hello friends, let's begin with the coding part now. This is my empty project created as a single view application. The name of the project I have given is UI WebView method. This is the app delegate file and this is the view controller file. This will be our main storyboard. Our requirement is to load HTML page onto the UI WebView and pass the data from native function to the JavaScript function and back to the native. So let's begin with the preparatory work. Go to the storyboard and drag and drop the UI WebView from the library. Now leave some space at the bottom of the WebView so that we can place our native UI buttons and UI controls over here, and we will trigger some action which will be used to pass the values to the WebView, and the same action can be used to get the values from the WebView, and the same values that we have received from the WebView will be displayed over here. So just keep some space at the bottom of the WebView for the native controls. Now change the background color of this view to some other color so as to distinguish between the web view and the normal view. In this tutorial, as I said, we will need three buttons. One button to set the values in the HTML page via JavaScript function. Second button to read the values from the JavaScript and HTML. And third button is used to reset the HTML fields. So pull the buttons from the library. We will need one UI label which will hold the values which is written by the web view. Now set the view controller as a delegate for this web view. Go to the assistant editor and create an action for these three UI buttons and create IB outlet for UI label and our UI web view. So we are good now. So let's close the assistant editor and go back to the view controller. Now go to view did load and set this class as a delegate for the web view. Self dot my web view dot delegate is equals to self your web view delegate. Now we need one HTML which will have some input fields. I have already created one simple HTML page which has three fields: username, password and user ID. So this is the HTML that we will be using in this application. This HTML has three fields: input fields, login, password and user ID. We will pass the values and we will populate those values into these fields, and we will change these values and we'll get those values back into the native function. So let's see how to do that. Now drag and drop the HTML to the project and press finish. Go to the HTML file and see this is my header part, and this is where I will be writing the JavaScript functions, and this is my HTML form which is very simple. This form has a name given as my form. This is the login input field with ID username. This is password field and this is the user ID field. Now let's load this HTML page onto the web view. Create one method with name load HTML from the bundle. This function is responsible to load the HTML onto the web view from the main bundle, and first get the URL of the HTML page from the bundle. So to get the URL of the HTML, let URL is equals to, and it has the method which takes the name of the file with the extension. So for resource index with extension HTML. Now we have URL with us. Now we need to create an object of URL request which will be used to load into the UI web view. So create a URL request using the URL. So let's create the URL request object. Now load the HTML using the mywebview.load request. Pass the URL request here. Okay, what's this error? Okay, let me fix this. Okay, we are good now. We will first set values to the fields in HTML. We will pass those values from the native function. So go to the HTML and create JavaScript function which accepts the parameters like for example we will create a function as set values and data to set. Yeah, so this is the JavaScript function which we will be calling from the native function, and this is the input parameter for this function. Now for this tutorial I will be passing the normal string with separators, but if you want you can pass the JSON string and then you can parse that JSON in the JavaScript and can set the values. So to pass the string from the native function to the JavaScript function, go to the set values method and create a comma separated string which we will be loading into the HTML. So my first parameter in the username would be test user, and my password would be admin, and my ID would be 2017. Then use string by evaluating JavaScript method in the web view. So this is the very important method. So we will be calling JavaScript function using my web view dot string by evaluating JavaScript from string. Here we need to give a call to this function. So copy this text and now we need to pass values here, right? So enter single quotes, then slash, and then as per the Swift standard pass the default string here. Now in HTML we have already written a function to accept the string parameter, and as I said I am passing a normal comma separated string. So when we receive that string in the HTML or JavaScript, we will have to split the string from the separators and we will have to assign those values to the HTML field. So to do that, first split the string so that it will give us an array. Sorry for that. Split comma. Now this A will hold the values that we have passed. This is an array, so we need to set those values to the respective variable in the HTML. So document dot myform dot, we need to use the ID here. In this case the ID is username dot value is equals to the 0th index from the array. Same I'll be copy and I will do that for the password with the first index, and the same is the case with user ID. So here I have assigned all the values in the array to the respective fields. Where we get this array from? We get this array from the string that we passed to this function, JavaScript function, and we calling this JavaScript function from the native UI web view event or native event. using the string by evaluating JavaScript method of the web view. Now, the way we pass the values to the JavaScript function, we want the JavaScript function to return the values to the native Swift function. So in case user has modified the entries, we need to pull those latest entries from the HTML into the native code. So first write the function in the JavaScript which will return the values. Function get values. Now first get the values from the variable, I mean the input fields. We want to return those values to the native function, and if you want to put some check in the HTML before returning these values to the native function, we can do that as well. So suppose I want to put check if the password length is less than or equal to 6, then if str password dot length is less than 6, then I will be showing an alert saying that password should have 6 characters. Return false. Same is the case with the username. If I want to check if the username is blank or not, then str user equals to empty, then I will be showing an alert saying that should not be blank, should not be blank, and I'm returning the false here. Else I will return the string which is nothing but concatenation of all those values. All data is equals to str user plus with some separator as tilde and strpwd plus with some separator as tilde str user id, and return str all data. So this function is responsible for reading the values from the input fields in the HTML. Then we can put the check if particular field has the length less than particular number, or maybe it's empty, and we will be showing an appropriate alert to the user, and we will not allow user to read the values until unless it satisfies the requirement. And if it satisfies the requirement, then we will pass the string to the native function. Now in native function we should have a method which will listen to all those events. So go to the button get values pressed and use the same function here, but as I said earlier, this function also returns a value which is nothing but the value written by the JavaScript function. So let here we need to provide an JavaScript function name. Now this function returns the value and it is captured in the HTML value field. As I mentioned here, we will be passing the false if user is not satisfying the validation condition. Otherwise we will be passing the actual data if it satisfies the condition. So in get values method we need to put one check if bool HTML value not equals to false means user has validated all the conditions. What is this issue? Okay, just forget that stuff. And then load this value into the label that we already have created and displayed on the main view. HTML value. So here when we press the get button values, we are calling the string by evaluating JavaScript function on the function JavaScript function get values. This get values function will return us the data, which will is nothing but the values read from the input fields, and we are collecting these values in one variable. We are checking if this variable is not false. If it is not false, then it has some values, and we are loading those values in the label on the view. Now finally we can also reset the values in the HTML fields. So to do that, we just need to create one function like set values. Reset values which will not take any parameter, and here you can set the values to the blank or empty string. That's done. Now we need to call this function from the native button event. Reset values will reset the value in the HTML fields. Now while resetting the values, we should also reset the values for this label. So reset the value of this label on the set values as well. Okay, we are good. Now the last, call this function from the view did load, so that we will load the page into the web view and the next routine will be handled automatically. Load HTML from the bundle. That's it. Now let's give a try, build and run the program and see if we have done it correctly or not. Okay, so this is our HTML page is loaded using this method, and these are our buttons: get values, set values, and reset. And this is the label which will be holding the values received from the HTML. So first we will set the values using this button. Yeah, so when we press the set value button, it set the test user as a login username, admin as a password, and username and user ID as a ID 2017. So when I press get values, it should trigger the validation that we have already entered. In our validation says the password should not have less than 6 characters, and I purposely pass the admin. So when I press get values, password should have 6 characters. Okay, so let me modify this password field to 123, and if I press the get values again, so this is the values that I have received from the HTML page to the native values. I can reset these HTML fields using the reset button. I can again set the values, and now I will remove the user ID. Now it should trigger the password check first. Okay, I will enter the 6 characters, and if I press the get values again, it will ask me username should not be blank. Now I'll enter some different username. The username should be username test, and if I press get value again, yeah, so it's printing the values from this field. It first check if the return value is false or not. If it is not false, then it's just loading the values received from the HTML onto the label. So that's all. That's how we can use the string by evaluating JavaScript method of the web view to pass and retrieve the values from the JavaScript to the native function. Go through this code and let me know if you have any doubts or issues in the understanding. Thank you.